I'm doing.
All right, and let's go ahead and get started. We're going to be moving back into the world of charts for a little bit. So in particular, we're going to start hitting onto the pie charts. As far as the pie charts go, there was a little bit of shuffling around of the data set that we'll be using here. So there's going to be two different versions of it. We'll hit that as we're getting into it. I'm going to be using Quorum Studio for this. And if you're following along and you see the lesson that I'm going from, this pie charts versus stacked bar charts, you can see here that the wine reviews that has been loaded here, ignore the mystery symbols. It's just a symptom of how my browser is rendering it. It does work. I tested it. This one's quite truncated. It has about 10 rows. And if we try the one that's on the actual website itself, we will find that the one on the website is significantly more complex than the one that had just the 10 rows. That is that truncated version that's up. The shorter one is not real data. It's sort of something that's been simplified to make it a little bit easier to see what's going on the graph. Depending on if you would rather have the simple version or if you want to have the full version, I do have the full version available. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to post that in the Slack real quick here. So let me go ahead and put that out. All right, so the CSV file should be available straight for download off of the EPIQ channel in Slack. This is just some logistic stuff regarding the file. You can use that one, or you can download the one that's on this link right here on the website. That's the simplified version. Any questions about that before we get into the actual meat of what we're doing here? All right, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to start moving along with the pie charts tutorial here. And the pie charts are going to look pretty similar to the other charts that we've used, specifically the bar chart, because that's the main one that we spent some time on so far, at least with the stuff that I was working with you guys on. Charts look pretty similar to each other in terms of how they are loaded into Quorum, but I wanted to just sort of go from scratch here and move through, and I just kind of want to work all together from a blank page into getting the pie charts going. So in order to get our pie chart going, I already have the data in my project. You can see here I've got my wine reviews full.csv I've loaded into my project in Quorum. People can feel free to go ahead and put that into the proper spot on their side as well, or follow along on the website. But as far as the code is concerned, I need to start putting stuff into the code. So as always, where do I need to start? Libraries, right. So as we've seen from Stefik, I could opt to not include the libraries because I could use Quorum Studio to provide it for me. If you're doing it on the website, you don't have code completion, so you'd have to do it manually. For this time, I'm going to let the libraries come as they come up. I'm going to use code completion for it. So ignoring the libraries, which I will need, that is absolutely true, but past the libraries, what am I going to need in order to start presenting something as a pie chart or as any type of chart in Quorum?
Data frame.
Yep, we're going to need data frames. So I'm going to make a data frame. I'm going to go boring. I'm just going to call this one frame. Right now, I have this little orange underline underneath it that's indicating that there's an editor hint available. I could press Alt-Enter to get it right away, or if I right-click on it, I'm going to use the editor hint to add a use statement for libraries.compute.statistics.dataframe. All right, I've got my frame now. And now, as we've seen, I need to load it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do frame::load. And I'm going to give it the name of my file. The one that I'm using is that full version of the file. So this is wine reviews full.csv. That is different from what's in the online tutorial because they're using the truncated version, or they're using the path for the original one. But I'm going to go ahead and I literally just said it and I've already forgotten what it was. Wine reviews full.csv. Wine reviews full.csv. So at this point, I need to actually start doing something with this. If we look at the tutorial, they have their own stuff in terms of what they decide they want to pull out into a chart. But I figure out what we can do here is I'm going to pop open actually, no, I'm not going to pop it open. I'm going to output this frame as text, output frame : to text. And what I want to do is I want to look at the headers of this. I want to see what our columns are and figure out what we actually feel like looking at. So if I look at the raw text of this data frame, the first row has our headers. We have an ID, literally just a number for each row, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, blah, blah, blah. We have what country it originated from. We have a description. We have a designation, a price, a province, a region 1 and a region 2, and then a variety. So at a glance, some of these are more obvious, I think, in terms of what they are than others. The country is pretty self-explanatory. I can tell from looking that there is the US, Spain, France, Italy. It's where it's coming from, right? In a very broad country level sense. Does that seem like something that we could reasonably put into a pie chart and it would be useful? It is going to be audience participation time with me. It's how I make sure that people can actually hear me.
Sounds like a lot.
Yes.
So I
Would
think
it
that,
add up all of the US and stick them in a slice for us?
I think that you could reasonably, you could use this for a pie chart. You could maybe make a pie chart that represents what countries the wines in our data set are coming from. That's a reasonable thing.
Can you make the font bigger?
Oh,
please?
yes, I'm sorry. Thank you. Is that a good size?
Sure.
Okay. And yeah, if at any point the stuff on my screen is difficult to see, please let me know. I forget it every time. I did hear someone comment that it sounds like a lot, and there is going to be quite a bit here. In terms of the country, I don't think the country is too unreasonable. We have about 60 rows in this, so especially with the chart taking care of it, it's not too bad. In terms of there being a lot, though, we also have stuff like the description. So the description column includes rows like, this tremendous 100% varietal wine hails from Oakville and was aged over 3 years in oak. Juicy red cherry, blah, 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 blah. Do we think that this will help us in our pie chart?
No.
No, probably not, right? We could make a really terrible pie chart. We could do it, right? There's nothing that stops us from making a pie chart with the description. And I imagine it will look marvelous if we do, but maybe let's not start with that, right? So if we look at the tutorial, I believe that they use the variety as what they suggest as the selected factors. So we could do that, or we could sort of start trailblazing our own way here. What do we want to do? Do we want to use the variety? Do we want to use the country, or do we want to use one of these other rows for our factor of the pie chart?
Variety.
Variety. Okay, let's do that. We'll stick with the classics here. And also, if anyone uses their own thing on their end, I cannot stop you, and there will be no judgment at all. As a matter of fact, I encourage you to do whatever fun stuff you want with the charts on your own end as we're going along. For right now, though, we're going to do frame : set selected factors. And we're going to give this the name variety. So we've encountered this once before with the bar charts. What exactly is this doing? At least what would it do in the bar chart?
Well, then what's the difference between set selected factors and add selected factors?
So the difference, I believe, and someone can correct me if this is wrong, but I believe the difference is that when you say selected factors, if you had previously selected things, it's just going to override the old thing with the new thing. Whereas if you do add selected factors, you might have had some old thing, and now you can add extra things beside it. Basically, if it replaces the old thing or if it does it in addition to the old thing.
Sounds right to me. I wrote those functions, so I should remember more details. I think that's right.
Yeah, so we've seen this before with the bar chart. What did it do with the bar chart to say that we had selected factors?
I'm sorry, is the selecting kind of like the filtering in Excel, if I may try to get a parallel idea?
So it's not quite filtering. We will see filtering in our stuff, but it's similar to if you use Excel and if you selected a column, basically using the selection is going to indicate that we have a special purpose that we want to use this row for, or sorry, not this row, this column for. But it's not getting rid of any of the data. It's just sort of narrowing down on what we're going to be using, at least as far as the chart is concerned, right? So you could sort of consider it to be, I don't want to use the word filtering because we're going to see something that's really explicitly filtering later. But yeah, in the sense of reducing down what stuff we care about for the chart, it is filtering it down to this one column as the primary thing that we're looking at right now. Yeah.
So you'd like to- So you basically you are selecting as truly as the word says, selecting a column or columns.
That's right. And
Thanks
so
for clarifying.
as we saw in the bar chart, when we used it with the bar chart, it basically split it out along the x-axis. We had used the breed groups of the dogs to set up groupings of bars that we were going to use, and it was that category that we were comparing across. For the pie chart, we're going to see that it does something similar, and that it's going to be the category that we're comparing against, but the pie chart is going to present it differently. At this point, I'm ready to actually make my pie chart. Are there any guesses as to what this is going to look like because you remember something from the bar charts, or just because you're looking at the documentation and or the tutorial? That's fine too. What do I need to type here to start getting my pie chart?
Pie chart,
Pie chart. Yep.
not even cheating, just guessed.
Yep. That is, in fact, the name of the pie chart is pie chart. I need to give it some kind of name. I'm just going to call it chart. And right now, I currently have the sort of reddish orange squiggly underneath that suggests I have an editor hint. I'm going to go ahead and press Alt Enter. I was missing a use statement, and now I'm not anymore. So there is now a use statement for libraries.interface.controls.charts.pie added to the top of my code. I now have the line down at the bottom of my program, pie chart space chart. That's the whole line of code. Is this enough? Am I done? Amanda is shaking her head. No, I need to get the chart from somewhere, as we
display it?
saw with the bar charts. What was that?
You have to display it.
We are going to have to display it, but there's one more step that we need to do before that. Before we display it, when we make the pie chart, we don't want to just ask the programming language, please give me a chart. Because if we do that, it's just sort of being summoned from the ether. It has no extra information that's coming out of it. It's just giving us a completely blank default pie chart, but that's not what we want, right? What we actually want here is the data frame has this value that we've just set as the selected factor for variety. We want to ask the frame, please give me a pie chart based on the stuff we've set into that frame, right? So what we're going to do is pie chart, or whatever name you want to give it, equals, and then we're going to add frame : pie chart, left paren, right paren. Does that make sense?
Say that one more time.
So the line of code that we want at the end of our program, as of right now, is pie chart, capital P, capital C, because that's the name of the type of object that we're making, right? Pie chart space, some name, we've named it chart on our end, and then equals, and then we say frame, that's the name of my data frame from earlier, frame : pie chart, capital P, capital C, and then a left parentheses and a right parentheses because we're calling an action on the frame. So the end result is pie chart, chart equals frame : pie chart, left paren, right paren.
Got it. Thank you.
Absolutely. And now, as Art was saying, we need to display it. So I'm going to say chart : display. And I am going to add in a width and a height. And on my computer, I have found that a 1000 pixels by 1000 pixels is a reasonably well-sized chart. I go ahead and I run it. And now we have a very complicated looking pie chart. This is using that full data set that I was talking about. If you were using the simplified data set that was put up, I think that you should have about 6 or so slices instead of the, let's see, I have probably like about 20-ish or so slices here. As a matter of fact, instead of just guessing, I believe the screen reader will tell me if I were to be so smart as to actually share with my sound on. So I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second.
Oh,
Sorry, I'll bring it right back up. Yes, what was your question?
I was just going to ask you to slide the pie chart over where I can look at the code for a second.
Oh, yes.
Okay, thank
There you
you.
go. That's the whole code. Sorry about that. Sorry, Derek, you're not allowed to look at it. I've stopped sharing my screen only to thwart you. And if at any point during the process, anyone has any questions about the code or just wants to be able to see the code, please let me know. For right now, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to pop open NVDA, my screen reader that I got over here.
Welcome to NVDA dialog. Game window, variety, pie chart with 23 slices. Use the arrow keys to navigate chart information and tab to access the chart content.
So the pie chart looks pretty substantially different from the bar charts. I think the pie chart is actually one of the most visually distinct of the different chart types that we have. It pretty thoroughly thwarts the sort of expectations that you might have from the other stuff where it might have an axis along the bottom or along the side with the X and Y axes. There are no bars or any sort of lines on it. It is just this circle in space with a number of colored slices of this pie and a very long legend off to the right side with the different values here. Accompanying the slices is these annotations indicating the percentages. And in some cases, due to some polishing that we haven't finished up yet on the pie charts, the annotations do overlap with bits and pieces of the legend that are currently being displayed. We could always do some tinkering with this to adjust some of those things, which we'll see in a bit. But for right now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just enter into it.
Chart area with 23 slices to navigate the chart. Press enter to move into the list of slices or shift tab to return to chart information.
So about 20 was a pretty good guess. There's 23 slices in here. And if we go through, we can see that
Cabernet Sauvignon 8.47%, Cabernet Sauvignon 1.6, Chardonnay 11.86%.
I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but the gist of it is that using the accessibility, you can get to the same sort of data that you would be able to visually and in a similar way that you would with the other kinds of charts that we have. I'm going to go ahead and kill my screen reader right now.
Exit NVDA.
Now, this is our basic pie chart. Are there any questions about the basic pie chart? All right. So from this point, we have loaded in our pie chart. And at this point, we're basically just using all of the default values on it. But there are a number of different things that we can do to make our chart a little bit nicer or to make our chart a little bit more readable. So at the moment, at the top, there is a title. The title just says variety. It is in lowercase letters, all lowercase, because the name of it was, or the name of the column was all lowercase in our data set that we pulled it from. I think reasonably, we could change the title on this. We could also add some text above the legend because the legend currently does not provide any other information other than just what each color corresponds to and the name of each of the variety types. But nothing has been added in order to make it, the legend doesn't have a title that tells us that what the legend is displaying, right? There's also some information about setting the legend location or adding a subtitle onto it. As we've seen from some of the charts before, we can get a secondary title underneath the variety. And I think that these are all fine. And I do think that we should go ahead and we should add at least a little bit of this. I don't think we necessarily need to do all of them, but at the very least, I would like to update our title, maybe add a title onto the legend as well. So I'm going to start by going back to my code. And so if I want to update this, I need to start adding some stuff onto the chart, and I'm going to start typing some stuff, and I want to see what you guys think of it. So I've gone to the end of my program. I'm adding a couple new lines. And now I am typing in chart : set title. And I am going to name this wine varieties. Now, I have just added something. And for those of you guys who are just following along, I have just made a mistake. So don't be too attached to copying this code exactly. Does anyone have any idea what I have just broken or what I have just messed up in my code?
Didn't you say you just put that after your bottom line?
That's right. I put this after the display. So if I run this right now, what do I expect the title on my chart's going to be?
Gonna stay the same.
It's going to be the same thing from before. That's right. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this, and I still have the title of variety lowercase v. as you have rightly pointed out, this needs to go up above. So I'm gonna cut and paste this. I'm gonna put this back somewhere in this code. Where do I need to put this in my code?
Above the display.
Above
line.
above the display line. Can I put it up above line 10 where I say pie chart equals frame colon pie chart? Amanda is shaking her head no. What?
So.
So
Can
if
see
I
what
put,
happens.
if I put this up here, I get the red squigglies of doom that tells me that this is a compiler error. The reason why this is a compiler error is because now I'm trying to say chart colon set title. And at this point in the program, I haven't actually made the chart yet. So it doesn't exist and I'm already trying to set its title. So it needs to go specifically between when we made the pie chart and we display the pie chart. Any questions about the order of operations that we're pulling here? Okay. So if I launch this now, I can now see that at the top, the title now reads wine varieties with my nicely capitalized text. Before I continue, I am perfectly happy to let people continue working on their stuff as much as they need. Is there anyone that would like me to copy paste the text of this code into Slack just so we all have the same thing before we continue?
Yes.
Just do it.
All right.
Leslie said yes. I say
Yes.
do.
You know what? That's fair. So
Make it. It gives us. It gives it. I mean, obviously, we can look this up stuff later too, but
sure. Well, yeah, especially that we do a little bit of freeforming on the listen. So having everything where you're on the same page is exactly what I've gotten here. I think, yeah, I think you're right. Just do it in the future. But for right now, I think we have a couple of more interesting things beyond just setting some names on some elements here. In particular, we can start messing with the color palette, or we can put a donut hole in this thing. So what the heck does that mean, to put a donut hole in a pie chart?
A hole in the middle.
Put a hole in the
mean
middle.
you literally stick a hole in the middle, right?
Yep.
Is that what we're
This
saying?
has absolutely no value in terms of conveying information or in terms of presenting something accessibly. It literally is just an aesthetic thing we can do because we think it looks neat, but I think it looks neat. So I'm going to go ahead and do chart colon. And once again, I'm doing this between when I made the chart and when I'm displaying it. Chart colon set donut hole. Set donut hole percent.
Is actually what it says. Oh yeah, the whole percent thing is tricky though.
Yeah, that's right. So what happens if I put 100 in here?
That's not what you want to do.
That is not what I want to do because percents in Quorum are weird in some of our stuff.
Like you have to do it by decimal, right? So it's like, yeah.
That's right. So when I say 100, I'm thinking 100%. If you want to say 100%, you actually have to say 1.
Yeah.
That's really unintuitive. What if I want to say 0? What is 0?
0.
That's still 0. Yeah. So basically, instead of going between 0 to 100 for your percent, you do between 0 and 1. And the reason why we do that is partially historical and partially because of some nonsense about how the graphics engine multiplies values. But it's not really important. It's just, except that there's something funky about how we do percents.
And if you put decimals in there, you have to put the 0 in front of the decimal point, right?
You do. I think that's right. I think that, yeah, it'll be compiler error if you don't. So
Yeah, little squiggle. Yeah. Okay.
So in my case, I have put chart colon set donut hole percent 0.5. I'd expect that to be 50% of this thing is now going to be a donut hole. Actually, I'm going to make this 0.25 and make it 25, just because if you use 50, it's going to be exactly half and half. And it makes it a little harder to tell which thing has been changed. So I've set the donut hole percent 25%, 0.25. If I launch it, I now have this nice aesthetic hole punched through the middle of my pie chart. Is this the most important thing you could do with your charts? No, but I think it's cool.
I mean, yes, it is.
I mean,
And,
kids
you
would
know-
love it, and you know, and it's just one of those things where we're just manipulating, which is coding. That's good.
Yep, that's right. So,
William, what does the screen reader do when you punch a hole in the chart?
that is an excellent
Yeah.
question. It does nothing. It unfortunately, it's a purely visual styling. It presents no accessibility information. You don't lose any of the context of the graph because the hole's been punched, but it won't go out of its way to tell you that this visual styling has been put on top of it. in a similar vein, if we do something like we change the color palette on this, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe that we convey the color palette of the chart in any way either. It's just the data, the raw information that we try and present, what we think is most relevant. If you think that's lame, let us know during the course at EPIQ or when we do the focus group stuff, but because that's totally legit. For right now though, barring any last questions before I move on from this, I'm gonna go ahead and close this pie chart.
One important thing to note, at least when I think about my students, it's important to remind them to have that leading 0 on the decimal, because they'll just leave it off and then it doesn't work.
All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and close this. And now we spent some time moving through the pie chart, go ahead and building it up, messing with the labels on it, giving it a little bit of customization using some donut holes and whatnot. We could also spend some time adjusting the colors and whatnot. But I think it's worth taking a little bit of time to discuss the pie charts and how useful they are. So as a really broad question, very broad, there's not really a right or wrong answer here. Are pie charts good? You can't really make an objective statement on it, but I see sort of some shrugs and some nods and sort of like, yeah, probably, maybe sort of nodding of heads.
It depends.
Depends. No, yeah, that's a pretty safe answer whenever it comes down to a chart. I could certainly make the wrong kind of pie chart, right? Like if I wanted to convey, like we looked at the descriptions that were in there before, a pie chart is not a useful thing to try and convey that kind of information with, right? Beyond the concept though of broadly is the pie chart good, which I think that, you know, for me personally, I find the pie chart to be a convenient way to visualize data sometimes. When it comes down to presenting information for individuals with disabilities, we have to ask ourselves a couple of extra questions. Obviously, we've been talking about how we make our stuff accessible to individuals using the screen reader if you are blind or visually impaired. And, you know, while I don't think that our stuff is perfect, we've obviously taken some steps on it. But when it comes to other groups of disabilities, there are some things that are a little bit less intuitive, I think. One of the things that we encountered while we were working on all this, because as anyone who knows STEPIC for even a casual period of time will know, there is a lot of time spent looking at evidence in the literature whenever we're doing anything in the lab. When it comes down to individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities, especially individuals who have autism, pie charts are more difficult to use than some alternatives in terms of conveying information. And if at any point I am misrepresenting this, I'm sure STEPIC will stop me and let me know. But the gist of it is that even though it might not be obvious to us why that why one chart or another might be easier, there are certain elements of charts that make it easier for certain individuals with certain disabilities to gather information from the visualizations that we might use. In the particular study that we ended up looking through and what research we reviewed, they were comparing 3 particular types of charts. It was pie charts versus stacked bar charts versus another type of chart that we don't support at the moment that they call the tree map. They also did a couple of works adjusting certain elements of if you had a pie chart, like were the segments like closely touching on top of each other, or do you sort of separate them out? Were they sort of like blended together? How much extra stuff you added on top of the chart in order to present extra information? And broadly speaking, what it seems to be the case from the current state of the research is that if you have the choice of presenting something to someone who has developmental disabilities, especially if you have someone that has autism, and if you have the choice between presenting a pie chart or stacked bar charts, the stacked bar chart broadly was easier to understand for the folks that were tested. So with that in mind, I think that let's take some time and let's adjust what we've been using. Instead of using this pie chart, let's spend a little bit of time with some stacked bar charts. So
Will, can I ask?
yes.
It's probably a basic visual question, but because of being blind, I don't know. I fully understand the concept of a pie chart being divided up in slices.
Yes.
how do the colors come into play? Like you had 23 slices here. You didn't have 23 colors, did you? What happened?
Yes, so I'll go ahead and I will run it again just so that partially just so I can see it and I can visually confirm what I'm saying is true as I'm looking through. There are on this chart, in fact, there are 23 different colors that are being applied to this chart.
Okay.
By
so-
virtue of that, a lot of these colors are really similar to each other, right? This might be a case where using the pie chart is a little bit difficult, and especially I have between here, let's see, I have Tempranillo or Tempranillo, I don't know the
Neo.
Tempranillo blend is a very light pink. If I go up a little ways further, I have something I will also probably mispronounce, Riesling.
Riesling.
Riesling, thank you.
Okay.
Oh, fine.
Wine is not my wheelhouse. Did not come to Epic expecting that my vast experience of wine would be tested. But those are both pink, and they are really similar colors of pink. One thing that is useful on the pie charts, if you were using it visually, and the only way I can tell which of these is which, to be frank, is that the colors appear in the pie chart in a particular order. So this very first element is a sort of a dark blue, and then a light blue, and then a sort of dark green. Those colors don't inherently mean anything. We could change that color palette to something else. But importantly, on the right side, there is a legend which indicates what colors correspond to what things. And the legend is in the same order that things are displayed in the pie chart. So I probably couldn't have guessed which shade of pink was which thing if it was just a total scattering. But because it's also ordered, I can sort of visually inspect and take some time to figure it out. But it's not fast. It was a little bit of a labor for me visually even to look at this chart and figure out which thing was this shade of pink and what it represented.
So the legend then also, does it have words and colors or just colors?
Yes. So the legend is basically 23 entries where each entry shows a square with a color on it, which is one of the colors that's on the pie chart. And then next to it, it has text saying what what that color represents.
So there's not a textual representative of the color, just a graphical visual representative of the color.
Yep, that's right. So on the pie chart, a certain slice is a certain shade of blue, and that exact same shade of blue is used on a square somewhere in the legend.
But it's not verbally or textually called, something blue or.
Nope. At no point during this does anything ever say the blue slice or the words blue or green or pink never appear anywhere on this. It's part of why as far as the accessibility is concerned too, the screen reader doesn't try and convey something as being blue or pink because that's not actually the part that matters even for the visual inspection. The only point of the colors is to be a shorthand to say this blue is supposed to be Cabernet Sauvignon, right?
Okay. Thanks for clarifying.
Absolutely.
So that is an interesting point because in class, the teacher will say, look at the blue slice.
That is true. Yeah.
But with the color palettes, if the palette is not big enough to cover all of the entries in the legend, that's why you see it get lighter. So if you make your own custom palette and it runs out of colors, it'll just cycle through a lighter version of it. That's why you're seeing multiple blues.
Yep.
And
So
the other
the
thing-
order on the, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
The order on the pie chart is just based on alphabetical. Is that right?
In this particular case, using the default values, yeah, this appears to be in alphabetical order.
Okay, and then is there ways to like change how it's displayed? So like the big chunks show up first or?
That's a great question. Hannah might know this better than I do. I would suspect that probably it's possible, though I don't know how you would do it.
Okay,
For display, I don't think that we have that. We have it only for the names in the legend.
Gotcha.
okay.
There, but the screen navigation, you can go to the largest slice first.
That is true. Using the screen reader, using page up and page down, we could bounce from largest values to smaller values. So just to show that off, I use NVDA here.
Game chart area with Cabernet Sauvignon 8.47%.
Okay, if I just wanted to go up to the biggest value possible, I'm gonna hit page up a few times.
Chart.
And then I hit it too fast and hit control, so it actually didn't say anything.
Sanjo, Pinot Noir 20.34%, value of 12, 10 of 23 slices.
So as far as the accessibility is concerned, even though visually this isn't sorted from largest smallest, you can accessibly still jump from largest smallest or however you want to navigate this. So you don't necessarily have to start at the beginning, press the right arrow 23 times, just try to mentally memorize whatever the biggest one was if you wanted to know what it was.
Ec-
All right, any other questions on this before we start looking at the stacked bar charts? All right. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go back to our tutorial page that we've been working from. And now if we want to represent our data as a stacked bar chart, we've seen this or we've seen the use of bar charts previously. And in that case, we only presented it with some limited amount of information regarding the breed groups, and then we asked it for certain information about the heights and the weights of the dogs. Now, if we wanted to use the stacked bar charts, we're going to have to provide it with a little bit of extra information. Before we do anything else, though, let's go ahead and let's just take our example and let's just change this to stop using a pie chart and let's start using a bar chart instead. If I wanted to edit this existing program to use a bar chart instead of a pie chart, what would I have to do?
Change the library.
I'm going to change the library, sure. So change that from pie charts to bar chart.
And then change your line 10 where it says pie charts to bar charts.
Yep. If we go ahead and change this, it says that's a compiler error now. Why is it telling me it's a compiler error?
You got to do the frame too.
Yeah, I'm still asking for a pie chart from the frame, and a bar chart is not a pie chart. So the compiler is like, what gives? That doesn't make any sense. And now I have one more error, which is on line 12. It is telling me that chart : set donut hole % is an error now. Why would that be?
A donut hole in a bar chart.
I think that you should be able to have a donut hole in a bar chart, but unfortunately the compiler disagrees with me. So we're gonna
Polka
go
dot
ahead and get rid
bars.
of that. What was that?
Polka dots in your bars.
Absolutely. Yeah, why not, man? It's just like if I want to represent the varieties of wine with some nice Swiss cheese bars, I think I should be able to, but we have not gotten that far yet. So, and I am definitely committing that we will totally have Swiss cheese bars as a feature at some point.
It's just adding a texture instead of a color.
Theoretically,
Just,
yeah, right. But so if I run this right now,
You can't call it Swiss cheese because then they have to be random.
yeah, it would be pretty odd to have very uniformly textured cheese bars. That being said, if I run this right now, all I have done so far is I replaced my pie chart with a bar chart. And if I do that, I can see that this is actually a functional bar chart. It is conveying something to me. What is this chart telling me right now? I suppose I should actually describe what's going on as I'm asking
number
what's happening.
of each variety. What's going on
Yeah,
there?
so in this bar chart, which currently has on the y-axis, it describes the count, which ranges from 0 to 14. Along the x-axis on the bottom, it has the different varieties of the wines. And then on the main area, I can see bars rising up from each of the types towards the counts described. And like you said, yeah, it is counting how many of the different varieties in the or it is counting how many occurrences there are of each variety within the chart, or within the data set, sorry. Get dehydrated fast talking through all EPIQ here. Now, if we wanted to stack this up, we need to provide it with some extra information. And if we're going to stack it up, we need to figure out how we want to stack it. So if we look at our tutorial, the implication that we're going to use is not just that we're looking at our variety as a factor, but we're going to add a secondary factor on top of it. We saw previously that we have countries listed inside our data set, and we can use this as a secondary factor. So before we add, there's also in the tutorial, the suggestion that we should add the price as a column. But before we do that, let's go ahead and just add this extra selected factor without doing anything else and see what it does. So I am going to frame : set selected factors. So I've done this right underneath frame set selected factors variety. I'm adding frame : set selected factors country. What do I expect to happen when I run this? Any thoughts, guesses?
So you're not taking advantage of the add, you're doing both of them as sets.
Yeah, I'm only using set, I'm not using add. So if I run this right now, I still have a bar chart. It is telling me stuff based on country. Apparently, the US produces a lot of wine.
A cheap one.
Well, unfortunately, the chart's not telling us anything about the price, at least not yet, but we're going to work up to that. Unfortunately, it is telling me absolutely nothing about the variety now, because like Art was saying, I am using set select factors. I am not adding factors. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to go back. I'm going to change that.
So the last line of code overruled or hid the previous line of code because both of them are select.
Yep, because they're both set selected factors. Importantly, the second one is the problem, right? I could have my first one be set selected factors to variety, and then my second one could be add selected factors country, and it'll keep the variety when it adds the country. But if I do it the other way around, that set selected factors will get rid of whatever was previously there, right? Does that make sense? Questions about that? Okay. So if I now run this,
Get that.
I get an error. So what's up with that? The bar chart creator does not support the number of columns / factors that were selected. As of right now, previously we had one factor. It was either the variety or the country. We asked it to just go to town with the one factor, and then it would present a count of that to us. Now I have two factors and it won't do anything. Why is that?
Do you need to assign one to the X and one to the Y?
That is, yeah, that's basically the problem that we have right now. We have our two selected factors. We said, okay, these are the two categories that we care about comparing against. And now the chart is like, well, heck, if you gave me one thing, I knew how to count that, but I don't know what to do with these two things, because these two things, they could be totally different from each other, and they are totally different from each other, right? It has the country, it has the variety, and it doesn't really know what to do with them at the moment. If we want to start doing something with it, we're going to need to inform it of what we want to do with these values. There is also a question of ordering on this. We've added these two factors to it, and it doesn't matter what order they're presented in. Right now, the first factor that we're going to be using is going to be used for the main grouping of these. And we need to make sure that we're doing it by country first and foremost. But in my current content, I'm actually doing it by variety before country. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change that before we modify this any further. This should still crash. Yeah, because the problem still persists regardless of which order this is in. But when we actually group these, we want the variety to be secondary to the country. Now, when we add this, I believe that we're going to need to add a selected column for the price. So I'm going to add frame : add. That's just go to do code completion here. Add selected column, and we're going to add price. And that is a compiler error. Did I add that wrong? Hold on.
I think if you're doing text, you have to have columns.
Ah, you're right. Thank you. So add selected columns, price. I stumbled all over the place on that one because I was messing up, but what we've added is we've got frame set selected factors to country, frame colon add selected factors variety, and now frame colon add selected columns price. If I run this, this particular data is very stretched out and small because there's so much stuff on this chart. But what I see now is that on this bar chart, it is no longer just representing all of this stuff as individual bars along the bottom, but rather it is grouping up the bars and then presenting information along those groups. So I can see now that while it is true that the US is producing a lot of wine, a lot of that wine is in one particular category, which unfortunately this chart is so dang small, I actually can't even tell what the colors are. It'd actually be easier to navigate this using the screen reader than to just inspect it visually.
Did you change your display to make it larger?
Let's go ahead and do that. So if I make this 1600 by 1600, and that is considerably easier to see just by virtue of making the chart large enough that we can see more of the context on it now.
So the stack bar charts typically need 3 sets of data, 2 wouldn't have done it.
If you want to have the stack bar chart, and Hannah, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this. I believe that, yeah, you need to have the 2 pieces of information in order to figure out what your grouping is and then what you're doing within that grouping. And then you need to have some information about what you're trying to evaluate within those 2 different categories, right?
So you don't need 2 factors, but you need to have multiple bars in one group for it to want to be stacked. So if you had multiple columns in one factor, it would also let you stack it. The columns would have to be numerical, but. Does that make sense?
Okay, so
As long as there's multiple colors in each group.
so the words, it actually can sort on the words, but if you really wanted to combine them, you really should have numerical.
Yes. So normally the columns will only accept numerical, yeah.
Thank you for explaining.
Right. Any other questions on this, on the stacked bar charts, what we've done here, how we've produced this, what this means?
Could you add the code to Slack?
Yes, I can. All right, that has been added to the Epic channel now.
Thank you.
And now, at this point, that's about what I wanted to touch on as far as how we can produce some of this information using the stacked bar charts. Let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break.
Do you want to show them how to actually stack the bars? Like chart stack bars, true?
Oh, you're right. I actually skipped that step, didn't I? Thank you.
I was gonna say,
So-
those don't look stacked to me. but
Yeah,
I
I'm
think
getting way ahead of myself. So if we go ahead and we do the thing that I completely forgot. So thank you. Gosh, that's embarrassing. If we add chart colon stack bars and then we pass it the Boolean value of true, and we go ahead and run this. This is where some of the visual similarity to the pie charts emerges. As opposed to just having different bars that are all sort of just grouped together in a cluster, by stacking the bars, visually the different bars are placed one on top of each other inside of the group. So this gives a better sense of the totality of how much is being represented by, for example, the US is way higher than the rest in this case, which was not quite as clear when we did not stack the bars, but we just grouped them. Thank you for catching me on that. That's
Yeah, of course. So that hopefully makes more sense to, if you can have multiple colors or multiple bars in one group, you can stack it. But if there's only one bar in each group, you can't stack it, obviously.
If you
How
don't
does-
mind it might be worth it to show really quickly what it does in NVDA too. 'Cause
Yeah.
It does work
Sure.
differently.
That was good. That was my question.
Oh, awesome.
Welcome to NVDA Dialog. OK, game window. Wine varieties, bar Chart area with 138 bars to navigate the chart. Press enter to move in. Bulgaria group, 1 of 6 groups, has France group, 2 of 6 groups, has 23 bars.
So similar to the other sort of grouping that we saw when we were doing the bar charts, you can navigate group by group in here and it will tell you how much is within each group. But if we go ahead and enter into one of them.
Cabernet Sauvignon bar, 0, 1 of 23 bars inside France group. Cabernet Sauvignon Cabernet Sauvignon Syrah bar, 0, 2 of 23 bars inside.
Actually appear to be stuck on this bar.
Cabernet Sauvignon Syrah bar, 0.
It looks like it might be a bug carried over from the histograms because it's
Yeah.
really the ones that are missing a 0. I'll make a
Cabernet
note of
Sauvignon bar.
Yeah, okay. So the way that you access this though should be a similar sort of drill down sort of approach where you move into the groups and then once you access the group, you can access the individual bars within to get that extra context information.
For those bugs, Hannah, do you mind putting them up on GitHub just so we have a list of them when Epic is over?
Sure. Yeah, I'm just adding it right now to all the final bug fix list that you made.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, let's go ahead and take a break for a few minutes here. We'll come back at, let's say, 11:05 to make it a round-ish number. And then we will come back and we will start working on filtering our data.